if you want to
Okay.
just do a brief introduction in case, Beth or somebody wants to watch this back.
Okay. Okay. So I'm Scott Benjamin. I live in the Boston area. I coach at Bunker Hill Community College men's soccer, and I also coach a lot of little kids soccer, 5 and 6 year olds. I also teach sports psychology, and and so I'm here to try to expound and expand the PCA ideas in the world.
Love it.
All right. So
you can just jump in and assume that we just did the introduction and now we're going right into the first principle.
Okay. Yep. So our first principle that we want to dive into here is called filling the emotional tank. Okay. And at the PCA, this is one of our foundational principles. We can just move to the next slide because I'll try to get going quickly. That deals with, keeping our environment, our coaching environment and our playing environment very positive. Could I have a volunteer read out this quote from Maya Angelou?
Sure. It says, "I've learned that people will forget what you said, people forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel."
People will never forget how you made them feel. I love that quote, because think about this. Last time you played a sport when you were in high school or as a kid, can anybody think about a time where you felt badly? And maybe even share with us that point. Can anybody give me an example of a coach that made them feel badly?
Well, I had a coach that made me feel badly. I'm not sure that I didn't deserve it. I had been so the night before a game, I stayed after practice and played doubles. This is volleyball. Played doubles for a couple of hours, and then another group, a recreational group, came in after that and needed another player, and so I joined them and played 6-on-6 for a couple more hours. And my coach, when he was leaving, said, "Hey, I don't want you to stay and play. We got a game tomorrow. You practice. You played 2 hours extra doubles. Now you're going to play some more. Go home." And I didn't go home. And sure enough, the next day I played really badly. And during the match, he chewed me out, and I felt badly.
Right. Now, this is a great example. Look at all the details that Ruben has in his, it's not just the coach chewed me out because I had practiced the day before. I mean, you remember the whole setup to it, right? And in this case, the person made you feel poorly. I'm sure all of us can think of times when someone made you feel better. And as PCA coaches, that's what we're trying to do. We want to be on the other side. So this emotional tank and the tools we use here will help us, so we aren't those coaches that Ruben remembers and details. So we'll move on. Okay. And so the emotional tank, this is something that we use. It's an analogy for our feelings, our tank of positivity, I guess is what we'll say. Now, before we even get started, I want you all to stand up. Can you all stand up? I want to show you something, how I work with my players to see if we can get everybody doing this. Okay. Now, this is for 5-year-olds usually, but I think we can do it here. So before I start every practice, right, we do this little cheer. And I'm going to have you all participate. But first, I want you to think of the emotional tank as we see it up here on the screen, right? Here is a full tank with lots of positive feelings, and you're ready to go, and you're feeling good. And here's a low tank, okay? So tonight, I know you've been at work. You've had to run over here to this seminar. You have to listen to me blabber on. Can you maybe show me where your emotional tank is? Everybody put your arms up and show me where your emotional tank is at this moment. Okay. Now, some are higher, some are lower. Now, I want you to remember where your emotional tank is, right? Now, you can put your hands down. Now, this is what I do with my 5-year-olds. So we get ready for practice, okay? We do a little chant. They're the Falcons. My 5-year-olds are the Falcons. And we get in a circle. We all say, "We are the Falcons. Yes, we are. We are the Falcons. We work hard." And everybody gives each other high fives. We're going to do the same thing tonight, except for instead of Falcons, you can be coaches. Okay? So, and if you want, you can even clap like this, because that's what the kids like to do. So I'll say 1, 2, 3, and we'll all do it. We are the coaches. Yes, we are. We are the coaches. We work hard. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
We are the coaches. Yes,
we
we are.
We are
We
the
are the
coaches.
coaches.
We work
We
hard.
work hard.
Yes, and give each other high fives. The person next to you, give them a high five. Give them a high five. Now I want you to point at the person next to you and say, hey, I am really glad that you are here trying to improve your coaching with this PCA workshop.
Hey, I'm really glad you're here trying to improve your coaching with this PCA workshop.
You might even say, you're awesome.
You're awesome.
Right. Now, let me see. Did your tank move at all? Did your tank move at all? Do you feel a little bit better?
Yeah.
A little bit better.
I do.
Right? So think about this with your players. If you can get them emotionally prepared right before something like this, we would do better. So you guys can have a seat now. You can have a seat. So look at our questions on the board here. An athlete with an empty tank, right? Someone who's not feeling good, who is feeling bad about themselves, has a lot of pressure. I don't know what it might be. Those athletes are probably going to be, we'll click the things.
Okay, sorry.
Yeah. They're probably going to be more pessimistic, give up more easily, be less coachable. Now, you guys as coaches, hopefully we did this little exercise and we moved our tank full. What do you think the athletes are going to be who have more full tanks? And, you know, what do you think right there, Ruben, in the front row?
Energetic.
Energetic. Yes. Kelly in the back row.
I think they're going to be coachable.
Coachable, right? They'll be more energetic. They'll be more coachable. Basically, the opposite of those with an empty tank, right? So let's move on to the next slide, and let's think about what are the things for our players that drains their tanks, right? What kind of things drain their tank? What kind of fills their tank? Now I'm going to give you a little scenario for us to think about. I am an 8-year-old soccer player. The game is tied. I have a chance to score. I'm right in front of the ball and the goal. The ball comes to me, and I'm a little afraid because it's not perfect. So I touch it again. I move it again to get it set up perfect. And then I decide to move it again to get it perfect because I'm really worried about not scoring. And then someone comes in and steals the ball from me. And I could have won the game, but I didn't. Now, you are my coaches. You all coached me as this 8-year-old, right? I'm going to do my little move, and I'm going to miss. I'm going to miss. What I want you guys to do is then think you are a coach who's going to criticize me. You're going to jump all over me, right? I want you to essentially drain my emotional tank, okay? So when I turn and look at you, give it to me. Give it to me, right? Okay. So I miss. Oh, no. And I turn sad face to the crowd.
Oh, wow. That was terrible. What were you thinking?
Oh,
it was awful.
Oh, right. You're now I feel terrible because I missed. And then I feel terrible because you told me I was terrible, right? I feel awful. I'm going to do it again. This time, give me what you think would be more positive encouragement. What would fill my tank? So I shoot, I miss. Oh no, sad face. And I turn to the crowd, to my coach, and they say,
good try, buddy. Good try.
Right.
Way to take it.
Right. Now, I missed. I know I missed. Right. I'm sure I missed. And I feel bad about it. But at least my coach is encouraging me, right? To do better. Now, I'm going to do the same thing, same exercise. But this time, I don't want you to say anything. I want your actions to show me how you feel about the situation, okay? So the first time is you're going to be critical of me. I shoot, I miss. Oh, no, I turn to you. Just give me actions that show you're so disappointed or upset. Eye rolls, hands in the air. Yes. Oh, you guys look terrible in a good way, right? And now the same thing. I shoot, I miss, but give me positive nonverbal communication. All right, thumbs up, clapping, smiles, right? Okay. So these things, an important part of this is I want you to think about your body language too, because sometimes it's easy to say stuff, right? But if I'm a coach and I say something positive like, oh, that was really good try, you know, and kids pick up on body language a lot. So draining the tank, we can click here, is the things that I just had you participate in, right? These things drain the tank. Criticism, correction, sarcasm, ignoring, nonverbal things. Those all can drain your tank. And we know we need to correct things and we need criticism, but we'll get into that, how that works better. And sarcasm, I have a problem with that. I am very sarcastic to be funny with my players, and I need to, at least my college players, not my little kids. I need to change that myself because I think I'm funny, but then I realize I'm not always saying the best things. And what fills the tank is more truthful, specific praise, right? So, and we'll work on that a little bit, being specific and being honest. So let's move ahead. Okay. So given this background that we have, what do you think is the one thing most coaches can do to be more effective? Okay, we're going to get to this question in a second. Okay, let's move on to the next slide. So in our coaching environment or our teaching environment, right, we do need criticism or critique or correction, right? Because if we don't have that, we can't help our players improve, right? We can't. So, but remember, even a kind correction can feel like an emotional tank drainer, right? Even when it's meant with the best intention. So what do you think in our environment when we're working with our players, the number of positive actions, they could be, you know, nonverbal or statements to criticisms, is an optimal area? How many of you think 10 to 1? Let's see a show of hands. How many of you think 10 to 1? How many of you think it's a 50-50, 1 to 1, a 1 to 1 ratio, right? Well, research has shown that the optimal ratio of positive things to criticism is, is 5 to 1, is a 5 to 1 ratio. There's an interesting study for John Wooden, the coach from UCLA, one of the most winningest coaches in college history. They studied him, you know, people were trying to figure out how he was so good back in the late 60s and early 70s. And they found that when at his practices, at his games, he had this ratio. Not necessarily every time he said a criticism, there was 5 things before it, but overall the average came out to be about 5 positives to 5 criticisms. Studies of middle school students doing math problems show that a 5 to 1 ratio of positive to negatives is optimum. And when you start to fall below that, kids start to not do as well. Okay, so click to the next slide. So given that idea of the ratio, what's the one thing most coaches can do to be more effective? Can anybody out there think about that ratio? What could we do? And I take
encourage the kids more than finding what they're doing wrong. Just encouraging, look for what they're doing right.
Exactly. That's exactly it. What we would like to say with the PCA is we increase the plus to minus ratio, right? Now, you don't have to be there with a checklist counting out how many times you say something positive versus negative, but just get in the mindset that we're trying to increase the positive to negative ratio. I'm sure a lot of you guys are already doing it, but just being sort of focused on it might help us on those days when our own emotional tanks as coaches is falling, and we might need to keep on track with our kids to keep it positive. We click to the next.
Yep.
Okay. Even Phil Jackson, you know, coach of the the Lakers and the Bulls, he subscribes to this idea and is one of our members here at PCA. This quote here about that time Jim's book showed up and positive coaching becomes an influence in my life, the 5 to 1 ratio, 5 praises to 1 critique. And of course, the rest we know is that the Bulls won 3 championships in a row. Let's look at a little clip we have from Phil where he talks about this.
Mm-hmm. So we can pretend it plays through. Yep.
Yep. Okay. And we go to the next thing.
Yep.
Okay. So let's think of a scenario. We have a team, right? We have a team and they are underperforming, right? They don't do that well. They make a lot of mistakes. Now, you as a coach, what you want to do is help that team get better. But we know we have to keep it sort of positive. So as a double goal coach, what could you do to give them feedback to help them improve? Okay. Why don't you just, the person next to you, stand and talk to them. Imagine you have a soccer team. They haven't won a single game. They need a lot of correction. Just let's brainstorm some ideas on how and what type of feedback you could do to give them. Let's say they've lost their first 3 games and they need to work harder in practice. Let's just say that. And so you share with yourselves, so the people would share a little bit. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
I want you to think about those things that you guys just said as we move along here. So we'll go to the next slide. Okay. So when we need to critique our players and help them improve, right? We have an E-Tank toolkit, some ideas for us to keep in mind that will help us get the most positives with the most success. One, when you're talking to your kids, avoid non-teachable moments, right? Remember that scenario we did before when I kicked the ball and I missed? That kid right then, when I just missed that goal, they feel terrible. They're not going to hear you if right then you say, oh, you need to put the ball on your left foot first before you shoot it. They're not going to listen to you. They just lost the game, right? So maybe later would be a better time. Also, critique or criticize in private, because putting on a show of a kid in front of all the other kids, they're going to feel terrible, right? They're going to, and it's not going to get the best reaction from the kid, from the player, okay? And these last three things here, I think are important things that can help with those first 2 points. Ask permission, hey, I've got some good ideas on how you might shoot the next time. Would you mind if I told you about them? Use if-then statements. So that takes the personality away out of a personal attack from the person. Hey, if you touched it with your left foot first and then swung through, the kick would go straighter. Or a criticism sandwich. Say a positive thing, like, I loved how you hustled to that spot to get the ball. Then the criticism, if you touched it with your left foot first, then maybe you would score. And then another positive, but you at least hit the ball hard, So what I'd like you guys to do right now is get in a group of 3. Get in a group of 3 out there. And I have 3 things. Each one of you has a player you need to correct. One player kicks with their toe, and you want to correct that. Another person has a player who doesn't follow the ball during the game. They're not paying attention, so they're not following the action. And the other person has a player who's just afraid to go in and tackle, okay? What I'd like each one of you to do for your specific thing, the toe kick, the afraid to tackle, the follow the game, I want you to ask permission. Imagine one of the other people in the group is the player. Ask permission, and then use an if-then statement to try to correct the problem. And I want each of you to try to do that, okay? Just so we can get in the habit.
Okay.
So we have them do it.
So are you having them all do it for a different problem?
Right. Okay. So if what I would do is have, like one person correct one problem, one person correct another problem, one person correct. That way, because they don't say the same thing.
Right.
That's my idea. I might need to be a little clearer on the instructions, obiously.
Yeah.
From what you just said.
I was just thinking about what I was doing, and I was like, am I doing all 3 or am I doing one?
Right, right. Okay, well, that's good. I will keep that in mind. Yep. So let's move to the next.
Okay.
Because we're running out of time. So in your book, there are a number of tools that we can use to help fill the emotional tank. And 3 specific tools here that we'll discuss a little bit is the buddy system, positive charting, and the winner circle. There are some other ones. The book is a great resource. It has some other tools in there that I'd highly recommend you checking them out. But right now, in your group of 3, what I'd like you to do is go to the book and one person read about the buddy system on page 35, one person read about the positive charting on page 39, and one person read about the winner circle on page 41. And then once you've read it, you can explain it to the other people in the group, okay? So we take some time to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And so everybody does it, and I say, now all of these tools that you have, you know, it might seem overwhelming. I've just presented a lot of information, but I think if you can just keep that idea of the positive to negative ratio in your head, it will help improve. And pick one of these tools and try it and see what happens. Right? Okay. And then I'd move on. I think that's the end, right?
Yep. So how would you transition on to the next principle? How would you link?
So then I'd say, okay, that was our first principle, the emotional tank. Our next principle that we will go to is the elm tree of mastery. And this is more about how we will, the environment and how we will teach the kids to improve and, and more tools to get better success or more success from our practices and our kids.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. Very succinct. Well done.
I was
right
trying,
at 20 minutes.
I was trying to keep that one. I purposely was really trying to keep it because the other 2 I've done have gone over. So.
Yeah, no, that was good. That's good to be aware of. It's good to be aware of. I just did my first Double Gold Coach 1 workshop last week, and I haven't really done that workshop in a while. Usually I get asked to come in and do, you know, different types of workshops that people aren't certified in. And I realized how easy it is to go over. And I've done this a lot. And you just get excited and you get into things. And I found myself at the end too. They actually cut me 15 minutes short. I found out a half hour before the workshop was over that the room was going to be occupied. I thought I had a half hour left and I only had 10 minutes. But either way, I mean, it's easy to get excited, especially about this principle, because the coaches, it's the first one and there is a lot you can do with it. So I think as long as you're aware of where you're at with timing, it's okay to go over a little bit, but I'm glad you're aware of timing.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No, it's okay.
I was just like, there is so much you could do with this, and I wanted to make sure that it had a lot more engagement. And one, because it's the first one, so you want to, sort of energize the people. But then the problem is, like, it takes time when you engage people.
Absolutely does.
When they discuss in a group of 3, sometimes folks get going. And so I don't know if I had too much or too little.
Well, let's hear what Ruben thinks about that.
Yeah, okay.
Well, I think what you're talking about is what makes it a workshop. Right? Otherwise we wouldn't call it a workshop. So, you have to create space and time, like you did, Scott, for us to talk about these ideas, to hear from each other, to work together, and to experience, to put us into an activity like you did at the beginning, the E-Tank exercise at the beginning, where you got us to stand up and actually do it. So I was very pleased because I was looking back at my notes from your last demo and I said, cut the content in half.
Yeah.
And I noticed very much throughout today's demo that you were being more succinct. You were keeping things moving. You were giving us the space to participate. I will say the one place where I did not think you did that was when you explained the drain fill exercise. You set up the situation. You're a player and the ball comes to you and you touch it, and so I want to go back to that. Let's see if you remember. When we go back to that scenario that you set up, did I lose possession of the ball in that scenario? Or did you lose possession of the ball in the scenario? Or did you actually take a shot and miss it?
I lost possession. the defender came and took the ball.
Okay, and then when you said, okay, now you're going to drain and fill my exercise, I'm going to miss.
Yeah, exactly. Now that you say that, you're right.
So my point, but my main point though is that's a place where you did too much. That less would have been better. That hey, I got possession of the ball. I had a chance to take a shot. And I was tentative, and I lost the ball. Okay, I'm going to look at my, so you're done. You set it up. Or you leave that part out and you say, hey, I'm going to get the ball. I'm going to try a shot and I'm going to miss.
Right. Okay.
Yeah. So Scott, I thought your balance and your pace were much stronger. I think all the strengths that you brought to the last demo, your personality, people are going to like you, Scott. People are going to enjoy you leading them through a workshop. I saw all those things. What else did I want to say? Oh, when you're explaining something like, okay, let's say I'm going to go back to that example. You're going to do the drain fill exercise. You're going to set the stage with, one way to keep us involved is Kelly's going to laugh, I think, because is to ask us a question. And, so where does a young athlete tend to look after they make a mistake on the field? And so you're setting it up, but you start immediately by having us think about it and respond to you. And you don't have to do that, Scott, but
right.
Sometimes, you start your explanation or your setup with a question, just to keep the conversation going.
I see.
Yeah. Okay. Just a couple more things. So when you asked for an example of a coach that made you feel badly, I told a story. I gave some detail to it. I don't, and I said I probably deserved it.
Right.
I think you brought out the most relevant part of my example. I think you did a good job because my example, people could have thought, well, what's the point of? And I think the main point was that the point that you brought out was, gosh, just look how clearly you remember all the detail. So the point of the quote is not whether coaches make you feel good or bad. The point of the quote is that you remember how people make you feel. And I thought you did a nice job of bringing out that point. I think you added a little there about the coach. You don't want to be like that coach. I'm thinking this is a coach that I admire. So I, again, I think you could have stopped there though, less is more. Okay. The E-Tank exercise, which I enjoyed, and I think it's great that you brought that in, and you got filling a player starting practice with full emotional tanks is good. What's even more important is keeping it full during practice, and during the game, and so now I'm going to tell you the opposite. I thought that you could have added just a little more there. So it's great that we try to fill our players' emotional tanks before practice even starts. But even more importantly, what do we do during practice? What do we do during the game? What do we do when we make a mistake? Keep it full.
Yeah, no, that's perfect, because then that's what that's a good introduction to the rest of the stuff, because that's what the rest of the presentation is how to keep it full. Right.
Yeah. And the one part, just to add to that, the one part that in this slide that's up right now, that I started hitting home with the coaches, because a lot of times trainers use examples of, I missed the shot, and now what kind of feedback are you going to give me? And I started bringing into my workshops that what drains the tank and what fills the tank is how you communicate throughout the whole season. And it's throughout the whole practice. So you're not just being truthful and specific or expressing appreciation or listening or doing nonverbals when a player's made a mistake. It's how are you communicating with the player constantly? And that sets you up to talk later about the culture of your team. What type of a culture, what type of a climate is on your team? Is it one of listening? Do the players feel appreciated? Do the players feel like you're praising them for the specific things they've done well? Are your nonverbals throughout the whole practice or the whole week or the whole season, are your nonverbals positive? So I just wanted to add that in while Ruben was saying that. Go ahead, Ruben. You can finish. Oh, he's done. That's how I shut him up. I just interrupt.
Somebody's cutting a tree down right now.
Yeah, exactly. As long as the tree doesn't fall on his head. Usually there's birds flying where Ruben is, so it's nice to hear trees. So thanks, Ruben. I agree, Scott. I agree with a lot of the things that Ruben said, and I really appreciate the progression that you've made. I think you've been really coachable. So a lot of the suggestions that we've given you, you've just jumped on it. And the next time you do a demo, it's different, it's better. So I've really appreciated that about you, that you've been constantly, your growth mindset's commendable. And I like the way, and I don't say that lightly, because there are other people that we give a lot of suggestions to, and then they come back and do the same things again. So I really do appreciate the effort that you've been putting into it. Because you're at this final level, I have some more suggestions as to what I would do going out live now, because I'm not worried about your demos anymore. I want to translate this to you getting out there live. So a couple of the things is the words that you use are really important.
Yeah.
And you use a lot of words, and I think you're getting better at that. But I think as you watch it back, you're going to find that simplifying the amount of words that you put in a sentence is going to help your explanation be much more clear. So, like, for example, just off the top of my head, not in chronological order, but the scenario, when we got to the scenario slide, leave it like it is. The scenario is there. Read it exactly the way it is on the screen and ask the exact question that's on the screen. So I found that you read the scenario, athletes thrive on positive feedback, but your team has been struggling and needs a lot of correction. And then you kind of added in little details that I don't think were necessary.
Okay.
Because the simple question is, as a coach, how do you give them the feedback they need to improve? You said something about maybe they've lost the whole season and they're not, you're like setting up the scenario, giving us more details. And I think the idea about a scenario is keeping it vague can help the coaches use their team as an example. If you give them too many ideas, then they're like, well, then it's kind of hypothetical. And we don't want the scenarios to be hypothetical. We want them to be where the coaches can think about their own team. And I've even said before, the scenario says your team has been struggling and need a lot of correction. Maybe for your team, it's a player. You can think of a specific player that's been struggling. So I want the coaches to connect this to their exact players.
Yeah, that's excellent.
And instead of, this is where the hypothetical's over, the hypothetical's the beginning of the principle. And now you're hitting, you want concrete. How can they help? And then you're going to give them tools. So just one thing. I love that we are the Falcons. Yes, we are. We are the Falcons. We work hard. I think that's great. And again, that's something that you can translate later into culture. Right. And when you get to the culture piece, all right, you heard me say our little Falcons cheer at the beginning of every practice. What's a value on our team? And the coaches are going to say working hard, because you cheer for that. So that's building a culture into your team. I would ask, though, pause a little bit more to ask the coaches for input. I always say ask rather than tell is always a good rule of thumb. But there's a couple of times I loved your examples, but ask the coaches, either give your example first and ask them, do you have any cheers? Do you have anything you do at the beginning? How do you fill the players' tanks? And you're going to find a lot of great examples of ways that coaches fill tanks that you've never thought of. And that's when you can fill the coach's tank. I say that all the time. Oh my gosh, I love that idea. I'm going to do that tomorrow at practice. Or that's genius. That's great.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
And then for the next workshop, you've got great stories to tell. I mean, 99% of the stories I tell at workshops are not my own. They're stories that I've heard from other coaches at other workshops. So just ask first rather than tell. The idea of sarcasm, when you got into this, let me see what the slide is.
Yeah.
Sarcasm, all of these things on here, that what drains the tank and what fills the tank, they're not suggestions. They're actually things that drain tanks.
Yeah.
So if you're talking about sarcasm and you say something like, yeah, I need to change that, I'm not really great with that, that's fine. You can admit that. I love that vulnerability there. But then really think about, why is sarcasm so draining? Like if I was a trainer at a workshop and you were a coach, and I asked that question, we all use sarcasm. It's fun. Yeah. We all laugh about it. Why is that under the draining column?
Well, because there's truth in, the people take they take the funny part out and take the reality, right?
Exactly.
It's usually funny for everybody except the person that the sarcasm is directed at.
And I always say too, who's the sarcasm good for? It's for the coach. It's for the person being sarcastic. It makes us feel good.
Right.
You know, maybe I haven't coached you the right way, so I'm going to make fun of you. And, you know, that's why sarcasm is always in the draining column. Because I've had some coaches push back and say, oh, you know what? I'm really sarcastic with my players and they all understand that it's all in good fun. You know, maybe. Yeah. But if you're not 100% secure in that relationship, you're going to do more damage than good, because there's always a little bit of truth in it. So, you know, just take it out, especially, as you said, with the younger players. And that's just a proven fact too, just from developmental stages. Kids under the age of 15 don't even understand sarcasm. Right. They don't get it. Yeah. So keep that in mind. I once had a professor. I had a coach from India. I was a field hockey coach. He was a male field hockey coach in the summer league. And he didn't get sarcasm because he didn't understand the dialect. Every time we tried to be sarcastic, he was like looking at us like, that was so rude. How could you say that? Because he literally didn't understand the translation. The other thing too, with this slide that's up here, what drains the tank and what fills the tank, I think most of it's self-explanatory. Okay. You know, you don't really have to explain each of these things. However, what I do like to do is have the coaches practice them. So I gave my example at my workshop last week about, you know, here's a player that's tank is drained. Here's a player that's tank is filled. You can understand how they would be different at practice. I want this side of the room. You guys are going to be talking about draining the tank, and this side of the room is going to be doing filling the tank. And I want this side of the room to go down each one of those. And I actually got them in groups of 4. And I asked them, each one of you, pick a different one: criticism, sarcasm, ignoring, or nonverbals, and give an example to your group of a time that you've done that or you've seen a coach do that and how they've done it. And it was just a 2-minute discussion. I didn't have to go through each one, but it was really good for the coaches to be able to practice, wait, when do I ignore a player? And they brought him an example. Like, I'll ignore a player if I take him out of a game and I just don't feel like talking to them. Or, you know, here's where I've done nonverbals, or here's where I've used sarcasm. And then the other side, I've said, get in a group of 4. I think I actually kept them in the same groups. And I said, now the 4 of you, I want you to give an example of all these tank fillers. And so, you know, it was just an exercise, an activity that didn't involve me going through each one down the list. And the coaches were able to practice, when would you give truthful and specific praise to a player? Practice it. And so, you know, anyway, I followed up with the big group at the end and said, let me give you an example of expressing appreciation, because some people weren't sure what that was. But for the most part, it's them discovering. And what we all know is, you know, people only remember 10% of what they hear and 50% of what they see, but they remember 90% of what they discover on their own. So we want the coaches to discover on their own as much as they can before we tell them. So
I have a question about that. I mean, that's great feedback. It's what I'm wondering is, that is also, you know, when we're talking about like that scenario I did with the kid not getting the goal that was up there, and then you know, everybody yelling at them. Would it be better to do what you just said with that slide and do the group stuff? I'm just thinking that if I did what I did too, and that, like, time-wise, I start getting, and I'm going over the same point. Right. So what I have kind of morphed into, and I've done a lot of different things. As I said, I probably do this principle differently every time I do it. But what I did really simply was just had 2 volunteers get up in the front of the room, and you're going to do the same soccer drill. I want you to take the ball down, dribble through the cones, and bring it back. Simple soccer drill. We ask all players every age to do it. One of you has an empty tank. What happened to Joe? Joe has an empty tank. What happened to him today to give him an empty tank? And they gave, you know. Yeah. Okay, this is Jose. He has a full tank. Okay, I want the 2 of you, when I blow the whistle, I want you 2 to run through that drill, and I want you to watch the difference. And, you know, you just get 2 volunteers to do it. And the one guy's like, oh, slow and not paying attention. And the other guy's like sprinting and his face is up. And, you know, so the coaches can get a visual of what players look like when their tank is empty or their tank is full. Then I switched into the what drains and what fills. Right. So that's how I did it.
Yeah, Scott, if I could add, you know, I think Kelly's giving you some options, you know. Yeah, absolutely. And, you know, so, but no, you know, you got to be careful that you don't, again, you know, you don't try to do too much. Yeah, exactly. That's why, you know, and you might do it one way in one workshop. You might do it another way in the next workshop. And you might go, wow, I actually prefer this way. And you know, you know, for your 3rd, 4th, 5th, and 6th workshop, maybe you settle into something that becomes your norm. But
yeah. Because the other thing too is, with E-Tank being first, a lot of trainers will do a lot of interactive exercises during emotional tank. And then honoring the game, they just sit and talk through the whole principle. So, spread out the wealth throughout the whole workshop.
Exactly.
So you're not doing all the fun interactive stuff first, and then you get to the end of the workshop and it's like, here's roots, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
So the other thing too, and this is my last comment for you, talking about strong language. You made a comment about, I forget what you said. Like you've come, when you asked us to do where our tanks are. And you said, you've come from a long day of work and now you've got to come to this seminar and hear me go, blah, blah, blah. Like, I don't want you to discount the value of what you're doing just because people are tired. So, and I used to do that. I used to say like, gosh, I really appreciate it. We're going to end on time. Thank you so much for giving up your time for this. Like it was a sacrifice for people to come to a workshop, where in reality, it's a bonus. Right. It's a privilege. It's a gift that I'm giving them. And it just changes kind of the attitude that they have when they realize the information you're sharing with them is truly a gift. And it's not like, oh, thank you so much for taking the time to listen to me, blah, 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 And I know you didn't say it on purpose, but I'm just saying it's just, it's kind of an air about you that makes it just a different way that you facilitate. And the other thing too, when you said like in the scenario, you said something about, we want you to be kind of sort of positive. Like those little tiny words, like sort of positive or kind of happy or this is a good, like those are all kind of soft suggestions. And we're not asking coaches to be sort of positive. Right. We're asking them to be positive. Right. Strongly positive. And, it's little subtleties, but it's things that I pick up now more than I'm watching trainers and observing them. Yeah, and I'm say it like you mean it. Don't just say sort of positive. We want you to be positive.
Yeah. And it's funny. I mean, I'm glad you pointed to that because I wouldn't have the blah, blah, blah thing. I know. I mean, I know what I said and I remember that because I was trying to be like, like whatever. But I didn't even know that I said sort of positive, that's a good point. So, that thank you though, because that will help me.
Well, I mean, I'm only pointing them out to you because people have pointed them out to me. So I'm just sharing what people have done to me. But it makes a difference in the strength of message, I think, when you're just super clear and we do have high expectations. And this is what we have found works best. There's no wishy-washy. There's no gray areas. We want you to be positive. Right. We don't need you to be perfect. We just need you to be positive. And that's a little bit more forgiving than saying, we want you to be kind of positive if you can. Try.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. We don't want them to try. We want them to be positive. So, and Scott, that's really the only suggestions that I would have for you beyond what we've already given you. I think the next step for you is to get out there and do it and practice it in front of live people. And you're going to have a lot of successes and you're going to have a few failures and you're going to learn from them and you're going to get better.
Yeah. Cool. So what is the next step?
So yes, thank you for asking. So the next step is I will send you an email that I will copy all of the PCA New England chapter and you'll be considered an associate trainer. And it will have a couple little details on there. It's kind of a lengthy email about what the next steps are for you.
Okay.
But what we're going to do is we're going to get you out to a live workshop where you would co-facilitate half of the workshop with a certified trainer. Okay. So if I don't know how comfortable you would feel doing that. Oh, you're actually the workshop at your soccer organization isn't a double goal coach one.
Right. It's not.
But so I'll send you the list of workshops. I think I've been sending them to you anyway. Haven't you been receiving the list of workshops? The trainer and you decide which half that is. A lot of times I'll suggest that, the experienced trainer does the introduction and then passes it over to you for E-Tank and Elm Tree. And then the trainer closes it out. Also because you get to learn from them as well. Right. We don't get a ton of opportunities to watch other trainers. So it's a good opportunity for you to learn from them. And then if after that one, if they say, Scott did great, I think he's ready to go, then the certification workshop would be next. And you just do the whole workshop by yourself. And we'll have like maybe Chris or somebody there just for support and feedback. And then you're certified. And then you can go out and apply for workshops and do them all on your own.
Okay. Well, sounds good.
That's and then when you become certified, then we do a 30-minute onboarding phone call with Sonia DeWitt, who's our trainer manager. And she goes through all the logistics and criminal background checks and W-9s and all that kind of stuff.
Right.
So that's where we're at.
Okay, good. Well, I'll look for that email. My schedule is a little crazy right now because of being in season, but I'm
absolutely. And, you know, and that's something too that we always ask, you know, let Sonia does all the scheduling. So we always tell trainers, let us know your availability. If you know that you're not available during soccer season to do workshops on Saturdays, or just let us know.
Right.
Open communication is so much better. And 99.9% of the trainers we have are coaches.
I know.
So we know,
that
you're going to have and the hard part is that we want soccer coaches to do soccer workshops, but soccer coaches are busy during soccer season. Right. So you get people like me. I've done like 5 soccer workshops in the last 2 weeks, and it's the only sport I never played. So it is what it is. Yeah. I'm learning better. I now know how to do a header. I know how to lock my ankle. I know how to do a pass. Like, I'm learning a lot of stuff, but you know, it is what it is. So if you have any questions for me, I'm your person to go to. I'm your go-to person until you're officially certified. And then we turn you over to the chapter. So any questions that you have, if there's a workshop that you're available for, that's not the Double Goal Coach 1 workshop, which is what you're certified in right now. Like if it's a parent workshop or if it's something else and you say, hey, you know what, I am interested in that and I am available for that date and it's far enough in advance, we can get you ready to do that workshop instead. Because it's basically the same principles. It's just sometimes there's a different book that goes along with it, or there's just a different, you know, way that we facilitate it.
Right.
But we've had some people that have gone out to do their first workshop, and it wasn't necessarily this one. It's been the next one. So it's just really up to you how much time and energy you have to put into getting prepared.
Yeah. Okay. Perfect.
All right.
Once I'm in, I'll be able to do it during season and stuff too.
Oh, good.
You know, but it's just getting there in the first place. And
I hear you.
You know,
I hear
of course, there's less in spring and summer, and I'm totally, you know, I have lots of free.
Right. Well, spring's actually not bad. Early spring is when we're probably just as busy as now. Like February, March is when we're really busy. Usually, you know, towards the end of the year, there's not as much, but I mean, this summer was pretty busy. I have to say, the summer was one of the busier summers. And as we keep growing and growing, it's a good problem to have.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you. And
thank you.
I appreciate the feedback too. I hope I can incorporate it all in there. And
I'm sure you, and as I said, there's gonna be a lot of things you're gonna